Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Gruesome and Grotesque video. As always, I just do these videos randomly whenever I come across something, whether I read it online or see it as a news article, or maybe it's something that I watch on TV or on YouTube and so on, something that I feel merits posting within this playlist, such as the case when I went on the little wormhole involving familicide. If you haven't heard of that term, it's that horribly tragic situation where a member of a family, for whatever myriad of reasons, decides to kill everyone within their household. There are certain categories that have to be met when it comes to familicide, involving the number of people killed and also the fact that the person that did the killing originally didn't die within that tragic circumstance. But in this case, when I came across this information, this may actually be considered the first known case of familicide in the United States. I'm sure there were probably other ones before this one, but this one was the one that is considered the most earliest documented case. Even after all these years, it's still just horribly tragic to read this information. It still boggles the mind why somebody would do something like this. And obviously, even in today's day, whenever you come across articles throughout the country, there's still situations that are eerily similar to this. But it has to do with this. You're looking at a representation of it now. It involved the Clemens family, and this was the case of Abel Clemmons, again, associated with the earliest known familicide in the United States. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all that information here. So who was Abel Clemmons? Well, he was someone that was in the United States, specifically during that time period of this horrible circumstance. He was born in 1772. I don't know, though, if he was originally here in the United States. Yeah, most likely not. Obviously, it would have been like somebody from overseas, but then came on board here. Or somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that part, if in this case, he was actually born within this country. But either way, though, eventually his entire family lived in an area that's known as Clarksburg, West Virginia. So some of you that are on a more local level there, how about that? Essentially, you're living in this part of history. He lived on a land that was owned by Colonel George Jackson, and while he lived there, everything seemed a-okay. In fact, he was known as someone that absolutely cared about his family, very much so in an affectionate manner. He was known as someone having honesty and integrity, somebody that could be relied upon. He was 33 years old at the time of this incident. Nothing really wrong with him, like when it comes to anything physical. In fact, he was 5 feet 7 inches tall. He was considered to be pretty strong, light-haired, good complexion. He was just generally a good family man. And somewhere around that time period, though, the weeks before this tragic circumstance occurred, that's when things seems to change. He was observed by others around him. It could have been by other members of his family, like let's say his external family, and then others like neighbors and so on, that stated that he was considered gloomy and melancholy. Apparently something was happening within his life where all of a sudden, whatever form of income or whatever form of benefit, something that he was doing for his family, must have been running dry or was cut off altogether, because people stated that he had this very, very big anxiety over the situations. And this is because he had a pretty big family. He had 5 daughters, he had 2 sons, and he had a just newly born infant, and then of course his wife. So obviously a big family when it comes to that. And then on top of that, there was also a niece that would stay there within the household as well. So presumably, if he was the only provider for the entire family, whatever was happening with his finances, whatever was occurring with his income, something must have caused or happened to be able to have him just switch things altogether. Now, it could have been something where it was out of his control. Maybe he was laid off, something along those lines. Or it could have been something where it was absolutely his fault, where he was in turn fired for doing something just stupid, or maybe something that was just in a fit of anger, that kind of stuff. It's hard to tell, and we'll never know, because obviously this thing happened way back when, over 200 years ago. And everyone that would have known more information about it is long past dead. Anyone that would have known about him, let's say even after this circumstance, nobody's alive to be able to give more info. So here's essentially the tragic situation that occurred. It was back on November 10th, 1805. All of a sudden, Abel Clemmons just snapped. He just suddenly went berserk. And when that happened, he ended up taking an axe and almost like straight out of the movie The Shining, he started hunting down his family members. Not only so he killed not only his wife, who was also pregnant at the time, but all of the aforementioned children and including the infant as well. So all of his household members, every single one of them were basically killed within that house itself. And presumably this was done while they were asleep, all of them sleeping in 3 separate beds, but apparently in the very same room. Isn't that something? Isn't that just something so horrific to just think about, right? Like on one day, on that fateful day on November 10th, 1805, either he was, let's say, sitting down somewhere in another area in the household, he had the axe nearby and he just snapped, or he was within that bed, at that very same bedroom that everyone was in as well. And then he just decided to get up and then use that axe on every single one of them. And immediately when that happened, there was a state of calmness. Like it was nobody had known what had occurred. In fact, there was a guy by the name of Neasley, who was purchasing some of the crops there from the Clemens family. And when he went there that morning, the morning after this tragic circumstance occurred, that's when he saw Abel there. But he saw that he was obviously in a whole different state of mind. In fact, he saw him as being severely agitated, almost in a state of insanity, but he didn't think the exact thing like in his mind, well, this guy just killed someone. No, he was just thinking that something was just off with him that morning because he was presuming that the entire family was elsewhere just asleep at the time, and that's why they didn't come out to see him. And so also the niece, remember I was mentioning her earlier, she was one of the lucky ones because she ended up surviving. She was not sleeping within that same bedroom area where the rest of the family were killed. Instead, she was at another place within that household. But she was there as well. She saw the father and she saw that guy, Neasley. She had no suspicion as to what occurred as well because, again, it's the furthest thing in someone's mind whenever you're thinking along those lines about somebody just being a little well off, like in their mindset. You wouldn't think that they had just killed their entire family. And so Neasley left, and it seems like the niece didn't do anything about that. It actually took someone else, one of Abel's brothers, who came along, and he in turn came from another area several miles away. He came because he was going to move with the Clemens family over to Ohio. I wonder if that also played some factors into it. Like all of a sudden he was going to have to move. Abel was planning to move his entire family across an entire set of states to go over to Ohio. And then when that happened, who knows what kind of planning that would involve, what kind of stress and a type of anxiety. And that just must have been compounding stuff. But his brother was apparently going to do it as well. Well, his brother came over to talk about it some more. And when he did so, that's when he saw the first indications. That's when he saw one of the sons, the eldest one, there, dead in his bed. And so when he saw this, he went across to some of the neighbors, and immediately that's when Abel fled. He went away at that time, and he was described by neighbors and others as he was fleeing, as someone, of course, in an agitated and in a state of insanity. That's when neighbors started to get the whole picture, when they saw everything else that was happening, the horrible, horrible circumstance involving seeing everyone dead in their beds in that one single bedroom. And then that's when the hunt was on. There was absolutely a hunt for Abel Clemmons to try to find out what was happening to him. In fact, there was even an article, a story that was posted on something called the Monongalia Gazette. A guy by the name of Joseph Campbell wrote it, and he in turn chronicled what was happening with that situation involving this familicide, and it became known as a horror classic because of the categories and the information involved. As far as what happened with Abel, he ended up staying for a little bit. Like, in other words, he was out and about, staying hidden. In fact, he ended up hiding within a set of cliffs somewhere there in the town, but on the north side in the town. And this was just for a little bit of time period. But finally, in December, early December, he gave up. He must have decided that he just can't live out there on his own, or he wanted to face his penalties. And he was taken into custody in December of 1805. That's when there was a trial in May 1806 where he actually put in his own decision of being not guilty as to what occurred. But obviously he was found guilty and then he was hanged. If you want to know exactly where this happened, it was over by Decker's Creek. So if those of you know, in Clarksburg, West Virginia, an area called Decker's Creek, if you ever want to visit it and you look for a locust tree that's known to have been used for hangings, that's essentially where Abel Clemmons was hanged. Who knows if that locust tree is there to this very day? After 200 years, it may still be, or who knows if it was cut down after all this time period and made a use of something else. But either way, he was hung there on June 30th, 1806. And then when that happened, that was it. That was the final resolution associated with the very first known case of familicide here in the United States. Overall, very sad circumstance, especially involving the family. Who knows why Abel Clemmons did it? Again, why he did it just went straight to his grave, and nobody has any more information associated with it. But I just wanted to present it here and then see what your thoughts are. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. Anyone else that has more information on this, including apparently his side, he was trying to say that he was insane at the time, but that was not considered any kind of valid defense. I would love to see what your thoughts are. Maybe some of you know family members that passed on information over the generations there in Clarksburg, West Virginia. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.